Good morning and welcome to I've Got Wood part 7? 6? 7? I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look. I forgot to look before I turned the camera on. Yes, believe it or not, I've actually got short sleeves on today. Not because it's hot outside, just because it's really warm in my apartment. I'm making a huge pot of chili. Just finished my exercises and I'm really warm. Speaking of warm, that's a good thing because what's warm or warming up on my table is my 21st century covering iron. And today I'm going to cover a wing panel for you. But there are several things, if you bear with me for a few minutes, there's several things you have to consider before you just dive into covering. And the first thing is, what's your covering scheme going to look like? Now, I know I've been talking about waiting for this missile red monocoat, which I now have for over a week or more. I have that. However, I'm not just going to use red all over the entire wing because first of all, I think that would be a waste of color. And secondly, I always like to have the bottom of my wing have very contrasting colors for visibility, whether it be a clear blue sky or a gray cloud cover sky. So what I've chosen to do for the bottom of the wing, and which you're going to see me do at least one panel today, is I'm going to go with a black and white scheme. So that's what we're going to do. If you look here at the table, I've got my 21st century covering iron sitting here on its nice little holder that I made because I lost the original one. I've got a small piece of scrap wood and a little swatch of Dove Gray monocoat. Now the reason I got that is because it's been years since I've used this trim iron or sealing iron, so I'm not really sure where I set it for properly adhering monocoat to sheeted surfaces. So the first thing I want to do, and something I suggest you do, especially if you're using an iron for the first time, a new iron, or one you haven't used in years, is test it to see, because the last thing you want to do, monocoat is almost like sheets of gold. It's hard to find and it's expensive, at least if you buy it from eBay. So you want to be very judicious. That's easier said than not said. Judicious with how you use your monocoat. So you need to really plan out your patterns and your sizes and all of those things in advance so that you're not wasting anything. So I've got these pieces here are kind of just from the roll that I had. I like to have it trimmed straight flush across. These were some random pieces, so I just trimmed that off. So I'm not too worried about wasting these pieces because they're not actually going to waste. They're going to be my test subject. So right now I've had this iron on for a few minutes. I've got my thermometer here. I'm just going to test the center of the shoe. It says 217 degrees. The heel shows 203 and the tip shows 200. Now I'm sure that the monocoat instructions show or talk about maybe what the right temperature range is, although I've never seen a sealing iron that has a thermometer on it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to put this on here. Now what I'm looking for is if your iron is too hot and you touch your iron to this, it'll instantly shrink and crinkle up and have a whole bunch of little ripples. You don't want that. You don't ever want that. Not that it's a death sentence, but you just don't want that. It's too hot. So it's always better to start off a little bit lower than too hot. I've got this thing set at just beyond, below the midpoint of 2. So for now, I'm gonna zoom in just a little bit so you can see this. And I'm holding this here and I'm just gonna touch it here for a few seconds and see what it looks like. So hopefully you can see that. Nice and smooth. I'm gonna go up to the edge. I'm gonna kind of go around the edge. Nice and smooth. It didn't crinkle. Now the next test I'm going to do, get over here, is I'm going to do a little bit of a pull test. See, it's taken a little bit of effort, and if I pull it off, boy, I hope you can see this. I see a little bit of the grain of the wood being pulled off. That's exactly what you want. That shows that it actually adhered properly to the wood surface, and it just shows that it adhered perfectly to the wood surface. So just for the heck of it, I'm just going to go ahead and just iron this on the rest of the way. See if that one spot reseals. So it looks like I've got a good temp on my iron. I like that. So when you're done with a sheeted surface, it should look like this. Completely flat, no ripples, no bubbles, nothing. It should just look beautiful like that. So now what I'm going to do is, now that I've got my heat range set up, I don't need those things. I'm going to zoom back out. And I have never done this like this on camera, so I'm hoping that I can get this done. So on this cadet wing, it has, let me see if I can bring it over here and show you. It has these wing tips that are angled and beveled. And then you got obviously your flat bottom wing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this part first, and then I'm going to cover the wing, one side of the wing panel. Now I've already got a piece of pre-cut, and I'm going to do this in black, and then this is going to be white, and then I'm going to do like black stripes or black triangles or something, just so it breaks it up. So let's see here if I'm in range. Now, so the next thing I have to decide is, if I'm doing black and white, the top will be red, so red will probably, the black may not show so much through red, but it would show through white if I was doing the top white. So I think what I want to do here is I want to try to line this up as close as possible, and then maybe just have a 1/16 of an inch overlap going back onto the flat side. So I think what I'm going to have to do is stand to do this. I'm not sure, because I just want to make sure, because I've got this cut, so it's pretty precise. So the key thing is getting it set perfectly and then tacking it. So I've got it tacked once there. And now I can kind of go back and check and see how accurate that was. So I'm not sure I'm liking the accuracy there. So I'm going to pull that off. You know what? I think I'll just see. I've got plenty of spare on the top. I'm not gonna spare. I'm not gonna take any chances. I'm just gonna overlap and just use a very sharp blade. So I like to kind of try and hold and pull to avoid any kind of bubbles at all. And hopefully I'm getting this in. Now, they have in the past sold these monocoat socks, heat socks or whatever, to go over your covering iron. I never liked those. I never liked them at all because they just seem to change the temperature profile. So now I'm kind of going around over the edges a little bit. Because one thing you don't want to do is you want to always have edges that are slightly overlapped. Always want to have a little bit of an overlap. So I want to overlap at least like maybe a 1/16 of an inch, 3/32 of an inch. Just kind of keep, and on curved surfaces you just kind of keep working it around like this. Now, any ripples that we get, we can typically get out with a heat gun. That's why covering a wing in parts is not just using a heat iron. You have to use a heat gun also. And we'll get to why here. The kicker here is this end piece here is getting kind of, it's weird. So you end up with some strange cuts that you have to try to make. Okay, so I think I've got this adhered pretty well here. I don't care for this one ripple I've got here, but I might be able to get that out with a heat gun. I don't know if that's an imperfection in the Okay, so got that. I wonder where I can put this iron now. I'm gonna put my Monocoat on the floor so it doesn't get touched there. So now, I wasn't prepared fully. I need to get a nice sharp X-Acto out. Hopefully this blade that I used once before is going to be sharp enough to do this. So now what I'm going to do is flip this over here. And I want to trim this, but I want to just kind of pierce this, and hopefully this is sharp enough, otherwise I'll have to get a new blade, and pierce it and just kind of run it along the curvature of the edge to cut this. Just like that. Okay, so I've got that trimmed off. Now what I want to do is make sure I want to hit this edge here that I just trimmed. Just kind of roll it over. I think I'm going to turn my heat up just a little bit more. Now I think I've got enough of a lip here that if I cover the top of the wing right, I can probably have a little bit of an overlap there. Otherwise I'm just going to make sure this gets hot. And you can kind of push back on it with your finger and make sure it doesn't feel like it's loose. So you can see here, you really can't see that. Which is kind of what I want, but it could be kind of dangerous there. Now, I did have a weird little curvature area here. So now I kind of need to do the same thing here. Hopefully this knife blade is still sharp enough to do this. It felt like it was getting kind of marginal. So I'm kind of just using this curving motion to form the covering to the desired direction that I want it to go. And I'm not doing this super fast because I want to allow the heat to soak into the covering in the wood. Okay, so there's the wingtip. Like I said, I hope that's enough. Okay, so the next thing is to cover one panel. And this is where I really may have to stand up to do this because I just don't know that I feel comfortable doing this sitting down. So what I did with this Monocoat was I cut this is the width of the roll. And yeah, it's not exactly, doesn't exactly cover all the way to the center, so I'm just going to put a centerpiece to cover that center section, but I like doing it that way. I don't like rolling out the whole roll of Monocoat and cutting lengthwise for things like this. If at all possible, I like to have wings that allow me to do this so that I'm cutting just straight across the roll. And I've got this all measured out, and I haven't taken the backing off yet. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make sure that I would prefer to have the overlap on this trailing edge. I want it to be the thickness of the trailing edge. And then the overlap here on the top of the wing, I want it to come up and over the leading edge just a little bit, because red is darker than white and it's going to cover that up. And the reason you want to do that, and the reason I do this and cover the bottom wing first, is you want the top wing to have a little bit of an overlap here also and have it sealed very well. So if for some reason you're flying and this seal opens up, you don't want that to happen. And because I've seen it happen, it'll pull the covering completely off and then you've lost lift. So that's why you always do the bottom first and not the top first, because you don't want that that covering to peel up, but you also just make sure you've got it sealed really well on the leading edge too. So that's how we're going to do this. What I think I'm going to do is hot. Let me see how I can best do this, if I have to stand to do this or not. Is it still in frame? Can you see it? Okay, I need to make sure it's right here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my covering off, or the backing material. So I cut off the edges that say Top Flight Super Monocoat on them, which is where it helps to peel this stuff off. So I no longer have that because I didn't want to have to deal with that, because that obviously has no color on it and it doesn't adhere. So the methodology I'm going to do here is I'm going to hold it in place, eyeball one side real well, kind of feel that, kind of feel it back here. I'm just going to tack it on a corner. Tack it on a corner, then I'm going to pull it here. Just kind of tack it again here. And go check back here. Now, as I'm going to go and pull back here, I'm just going to kind of pull back this way. You can see I got a little bit of black on the iron. So I'm going to work my way this way, just kind of gently pulling, tacking, pulling and tacking each way. I hope my head isn't in the way. Now, I'm not seriously ironing anything down here yet. I'm just tacking. Then when I get near the center section, I need to start pulling it this way. So I'm just gently pulling. Can you still see what I'm doing? Okay. Alright, so yeah, I got some black monocoat or black stuff there. I think I can get that off. So now it looks like I've got this in place. Yeah, you're going to see a few ripples here. Not a problem. you might see a few ripples. Now, to me, it looks like this is pretty well even. I don't have quite as much on the rear here as I wanted. I'm going to turn this one camera off. I don't have as much here as I hoped, but what I'm going to do here is feel this. It feels good. I'm just going to, now, since I'm happy with the positioning, now I'm going to go and iron. Only on the sheeted section. You don't want to run your iron in the rib bays. So you only want to iron on the sheeted sections. I'm feeling how far my sheeting is here so I can... So I'm only worrying about the top surface here. I'm not worrying about edges at this time yet. Just the top surface. Getting it in place because I'm pretty happy with how it's positioned. As you can see, I'm always kind of moving the direction that I installed it. Oops, I didn't want to go there. Now, again, I've done this a few times. But as always, as with most things, I don't consider myself an expert. So, okay, let's get that out of the way. Alright, so now what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to stand this up and I'm going to kind of roll over my edges. Now I didn't get quite the alignment I hoped for here. And I have a little bit more on the leading edge than I wanted, but you know, that stuff happens sometimes. It's been a while. And this is also the first time I've ever done this on camera, so. Now you may be asking, why do I have these black marks on here? When I was going over and doing the edge, sealing the edge of this, sometimes that'll pull off some of the adhesive, the black adhesive. Well, it's black because it's black monocoat, but that's how that gets on there. Typically that can be cleaned off with alcohol, acetone, Goo Gone, or something. So this turned out pretty well. I don't really have any ripples in the bays, which in a way is kind of unfortunate because it would have been nice if I'd had a kind of a ripply bay. I could have showed you the beauty of using the heat gun, because that's where the heat gun comes into play. The heat gun is what shrinks the coating. Covering, not coating, covering. So that wasn't what I wanted to do there. So the heat gun shrinks the covering, the iron adheres it to wood surfaces. Now, no, I will not iron over the cap strips. No, 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 no. Don't do that. Do not do that. I don't think I'm going to worry too much about. This is where it kind of gets A little dicey here on the table with trying to keep a position for the camera because I need to be pulling this as I'm adhering it to the leading edge. And I don't know if the camera's going to be zooming correctly focusing on that or not. I need to be pulling and not burning my fingers. Now see, if Monaco was a cheap, like that new cover from Value Hobby, I would have just had a lot more, damn it, would have had a lot more stuff here to work with. But as it is, I want to try to be, like I said, try to use that hard word again, as judicious as possible with my covering material, because it's not readily available. Now, new cover from Value Hobby is a good covering, and I've used it before. I like it. It's less expensive. You get like a 16-foot roll for $15. It's not bad at all. I think you get the idea here. I'm going to leave this edge like that and unplug my iron and plug my heat gun in. So stand by a second. Okay, so I got my heat gun here, and I'm just going to do some final shrinking. My edges all feel good there. So the thing with the heat gun is, if you're going to use a heat gun, this is my heat gun that I've had for, I don't know, 30 years. It's an industrial strength heat gun. It gets extremely hot. Heat guns designed for shrinking monocoat don't get as hot as industrial strength ones. So I have to be extremely, really careful with this thing. So obviously it's got two settings, high or low, two settings, more hot and super frickin' hot. So I'm not using super frickin' hot. But the other thing that's important to do with anytime you're using a heat gun is to kind of start high, start far away, and then move closer, which is what I'm going to do here. So here is a ripple. I'm going to start here, and this is where just the skill comes into play, because you have to watch the monocoat very closely, and you can kind of watch it heat up and get tight. And I'm just going bay by bay here. So it looks like I found the right height, which for this heat gun is about 3 inches above the surface. And you can hit the wood areas too if you want. I almost kind of have to hold it at an angle so I can sit here and watch the ripples disappear. Just watch the covering shrink. So the thing is, if you get too hot a heat and you get too close, you're going to burn a hole in your covering. And that's not a good thing. All right. Drum tight. And there you go. There is one wing panel covered. Now, I'm probably going to do the other wing panel without you watching. And the next time you see me will be, I'll have this sealed down or trimmed, and I'll be covering the top with red. Okay, so that was incredibly fun. It was a little bit challenging to do that on video. I haven't looked to see how well it looks like on the video. Hopefully it looks good enough. But I believe that I remembered all of the things that I wanted to instruct you all on as far as what I know about covering. and it looks like it turned out pretty well. The only thing I wasn't really pleased with was the little bleed over from the black monocoat that's on the white. I think I can clean that off. It shouldn't be a big deal. I think I did a pretty good job for actually not having covered cars for 7, 8 years maybe. But anyway, hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, when you see me cover again, it's going to be doing the piece of red on the top of that wing panel. But before I do that, I'm probably going to finish covering the bottom because I don't like to leave a wing just a half of it done and then just let it sit for a while. It's best just to get one whole side done and then work on the other side. That way you can kind of lay it on the side that's covered and keep the other side safe from damage and bumping and stuff like that. So anyway, that was fun. Hope you learned something. Thank you.